And welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina.
Am I in the dark again?
You probably are. We're going to ask Mark how he's feeling here in a second. I have a feeling how this is going to go.
We got screwed.
I have a feeling how this is going to go.
Pass interference on the offense.
There's never, new news is very rare to come by. I feel like this week was redundant. I felt like we kept talking about masks and we kept talking about vaccinations and we kept talking about Afghanistan. Just feels like a lot of stuff in the news is redundant. So we're going to try to find different angles on some of this stuff. But before we get to any of that, Mark, how are you feeling today?
I feel like, for sake of full disclosure, Dallas should have lost by 2 touchdowns. If Tampa didn't fumble at the 2, and Tampa had a lot of bad turnovers, and we had a lot of bad kicks. And if you look at the whole body of work, we should have lost. Like at the end, they're going in the end zone, and was it Godwin that fumbled? I think it was Godwin that fumbled it, and he dropped that pass. It was a tough catch, but an NFL receiver should catch it. So we were lucky to be close. But once we were close, you can't push off like that and knock over the defensive back. It is a penalty. I think if it was at home, if it was in Dallas, I think they would have called it a penalty. I think the referees caved to the home crowd. When they bring in the rules guy and what do you think? And he's like, I think it's pass interference. And then Chris Collinsworth is like, well, I don't know. He was moved. It exists in theory. Right. It doesn't really get called.
Correct.
But when they bring in the rules analyst and he's like, yeah, that's offensive pass interference. And then Collinsworth is like, well, I don't hate I know Collinsworth is a much maligned broadcaster. I actually kind of like him. I was shocked at how cowardly his approach was to that call because he loved the drama of Dak has come back and played well. And Dak has led Dallas to the lead. And now Brady in their game after the Super Bowl. And this is theatrics and it's Hollywood. And he's going to lead them down to the win. And he didn't want the story. Charles Barkley would have said that's pass interference.
So I guess.
And Collinsworth took the cowardly approach and said, well, I don't think. And here's what I want to know. I want to know if the NFL is reprimanding their rules guy for coming in and saying, yeah, the referee blew the call with 30 seconds to go in the game, because that's what the guy said. And I don't know. I think he's in the principal's office today, and they're like, look, dude, everything was happy. Don't call out our officials when they blow it with under a minute to go and give Tom Brady a win. But that's what happened, and everyone knows it. Now I'm done.
So are we talking about the Cowboys first today?
I got everything. We should have lost by 14. If they could hang on to if Tampa could have hung on to the football on little passes, whoops. That, and I do agree with that. There is nothing like Tom Brady threw 2 picks yesterday. So Tom Brady had like in volleyball, and who here? Some defensive guy catch it. So Brady's like, well, that's great. And the other one's on a Hail Mary at the end of the half.
Right.
So it's like he has 2 interceptions when he really shouldn't have thrown any. But be that as it may. It was fun. It was fun to watch. I didn't think I would be riveted till the very end. I thought we were going to lose by 20. And we probably should have lost by 20. But as it ends up, we should have won by 1. But did I mention we got screwed? Pass interference on the offense. How are you today?
I'm good. Do you want to talk? You want to go into 9/11? I thought it would be interesting. Obviously, 9/11 is tomorrow. 20 years. A lot of stuff's being done about it. We talked a little bit about the documentary on Netflix that came out. There's some stuff flying around on YouTube, obviously different interviews now. People that were involved with it, I don't want to say they're much more willing to talk about it now, but there's certainly a deeper reflection on it 20 years removed.
Yeah.
So there's more, it's just kind of a more in-depth. People have had chance to have perspective about it, and now they're much more willing to talk about it. So there's a lot of neat, interesting stuff. It's not a general question that you're able to talk to people about, but whenever the topic does come up, I'm always interested to hear where people were, what their initial reaction was. That day is so polarizing. It's always neat to hear different people's perspective of where they are or what they were doing. How vividly do you remember 9/11?
Well, I think that's for our generation. That's the moment. For our parents' generation, they do the same thing about when Kennedy was shot. And you ask all Baltimore, well, just in a Baltimore suburb, just south of Baltimore, living in Baltimore. The thing that when I talk to people here, what I found out is like the world didn't shut down. In Baltimore, right within a stone's throw of the aquarium, when you're at Inner Harbor, there is a big, tall building. There is a World Trade Center in Baltimore. It's not as big, it's not as famous, but it's the biggest, tallest. It's right there. It's right on the water. So because of that, and because nobody, DC, New York, here's a World Trade Center, it's right in between, they evacuated the city because they were afraid that there's going to be a plane flying into this. So it was like we got sent home from work.
Yeah.
Nobody knew, and then we just sat and watched TV all day. So as places I found out here that like kind of, oh, this is happening, but life goes on. For us, it wasn't. Like they were like, go home.
Yeah, it was very different. I want to say I was in 8th grade. So for me, it's very, like looking back on it, I feel like the difference, that 20-year gap feels so much bigger. The difference between like 8th grade and like joining middle adulthood, as opposed to what I think middle adulthood to like older adulthood.
And you found out adulthood is overrated.
I've enjoyed adulthood so far. It's definitely, there are perks to it, but certainly some things that you thought to be true are not. It's funny. I always thought just eating whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, was just this great thing. And then you get to adulthood and you realize like that's not really how it goes, it's not that great. So being in 8th grade, I do remember we were in a gym class across town. So we were one of the few classes that had a TV on, because like the health center has TVs up by the treadmills and stuff. So the news was on, and so it was talking about the first plane. And like I was actually watching the second plane hit. I feel like I'm probably one of the only people my age that actually saw the second plane hit when it hit. Because most of 8th graders were in school and they were in class. And when the first plane hit, it wasn't a terroristic threat at that time. People thought it was this horrific accident that had happened. So I do remember seeing the second plane hit. I remember us having to go back over to the school. Like they got a phone call and said, get the kids back over here. We were shuffled into a history classroom and they had it up on the TV. The weird part about being that young, and I just to be like fully transparent, when you're that young, like you knew what was happening, but you didn't really understand the severity of it. Because like like a video game, like a movie, like a special effect, you know it's happening, but you're so far removed from what's happening that to actually grasp it took a second. For me, the first time that you saw somebody jump out of the tower, that for me was like a very surreal coming to grips maturity moment, where all of a sudden the first aspect of it was like this visual stimulant. And then the first time somebody jumped out of a tower and it was caught on a news channel, that for me was like a very sinking, like, oh, like this is not, I don't want to say that I ever thought it was entertainment, but the severity and the realness just flooded over like the 13-year-old me.
Well, 8:48 sticks in my head. Is that when the first plane hit
I don't know the exact times.
Because I remember, and in a major metropolitan area, when you're in Baltimore, there's multiple radio stations. They all have their morning talk shows who all are trying to be. And I want to say it was 8:48 because I was at work. I heard it from a coworker who was, and because we had to be there at 9, so you get people that are coming in, and someone comes in and they're like, hey, a plane just hit the World Trade Center. And because there's no streaming, there's no live stream back then. So our immediate thought is it's some moron with his little biplane
Right.
that went rogue and lost control and smashed into on our first reaction as we're discussing it amongst 3 or 4 of us, we never thought it was a jetliner. We thought, because a plane just hit the World Trade Center, until then you got the report that no, it was a jet. It was huge. It wasn't a little one-seater. You're picturing like Charlie Brown and Snoopy with their heads sticking out.
Sure.
So that I do remember that. And I also the crazy thing in my personal world was my first child was born on September 14th.
Okay.
So on September 11th, my ex was very, very pregnant and weren't due yet, but pregnancies come. They don't always come on the due date.
Sure.
And I can remember sitting in our living room watching this, and she is ready to go. And I said to her, don't go into labor because I'm not taking you to the hospital today. We're not having this kid today.
Yeah.
And which, of course, she's like, well, I can't really control that. But I was like, you get the point. We're not having a kid born on September 11th. Yeah. September 12th will be fine. Right. And our daughter ended up being born on the 14th.
One of my exes that you and I talk about a lot, her birthday was September 12th. And it's funny, the reason you bring
But not that day.
No, not that day.
Life.
Yes, just in life. Her birthday was September 12th. But one of the things that you brought up, I saw a thing online, and this lady wrote this nice piece about how September 11th was awful and they would never want it to happen again. But like, they almost wish September 12th could be a holiday because there was this idea, like the unity and the help and people reaching out. There was this very unique feeling surrounding September 12th that you just, like, we celebrate the 4th of July and like we have those types of events, but there was something about September 12th that you could feel it and you could see it. It was very tangible in the way people would treat each other. And so it was just, you brought up September 12th and it made me think about that piece I had read.
Well, I remember too.
Real quick, the last thing about being that young and having it happen, I remember, like, you just don't understand. Like, I didn't even, like, now, I put myself in the shoes of if it would have happened when I was in my 30s, like, when the second plane hits, the reality of, like, this is a terrorist. We're probably, like, we could go to war. Very subtle things like what could happen to terror, all those things. When you're 13, like, none of those thoughts are going through your head.
Right.
Like, it almost took something to snap you from being 13 to all of a sudden, like, being 18, like, in a moment. And so that day, in a weird way, my maturity level jumped significantly on 9/11/2001.
What's funny is listening to you talk about this, of where you were. Mm-hmm. I was either in 6th grade or 8th grade because I was in Harry Boyer's metal shop class when the space shuttle exploded.
Okay.
Because that was back in the day. They wheeled a TV in on one of those carts, and that's where I saw it. So I was in school, and that was another moment where people are at, where you can say in history, where were you when the space shuttle exploded? Yeah. It's as one of the things about it, and it obviously was such a tragic event, but it was such a unifying event. Yeah. And there was that moment. Now, 20 years later, we are so divided as a nation. And back then we were so unified as a nation. And the vote to go to war was like, it did not split party lines. Like, everyone was voting. And that's why one of the things I also hate about politics is, at the times, we thought of weapons of mass destruction, and we knew that, we had just been attacked on our home soil and we should retaliate. And then the people later that were like, well, I voted against it and I knew. And you're just like, stop it already. Right. Like, the country was unified, and it's sad that it took something like that to unify us. Yeah. But it's just a reminder. And the more I talk to people all over the spectrum, when you can get on a smaller basis, we are so much more similar than we are different. Sure. And the world does not reflect that now. The world, they enjoy being different. Yeah. And, I don't know. Anyway, and we're going again.
Two things before we get off the 9/11 topic, and you and I have talked about this before. There are two really good videos that you can find online. One of them, and I've talked to you before, There's like a 20-minute video about George W. Bush throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium. And it is incredible to watch. They interviewed, Jeter's interviewed, Condoleezza Rice is interviewed, like, and they talk about all the pressure of like walking up. So if you're a sports fan and obviously you're kind of like a rah America person, that 20-minute video of George W. Bush going out and throwing this first pitch is incredible to watch. Have you seen it before?
No, but I do know that I've heard the interviews and I've heard the story because he warmed up in the batting cage underneath.
Yes.
And I know Jeter said to him, are you going to go all the way up to the top of the mound and throw it from the rubber, or are you going to throw it from down in front? And Bush said, well, I was just going to throw it from the front of the mound. And Jeter said, if you do, they'll boo you. You need to get to the top of the mound.
Right.
So Bush is like, okay. So then Bush is warming up in the tunnel. And Jeter, when he's going, he goes, I'm going to throw it from the top of the mound. And Jeter goes, well, don't bounce it, because if you bounce it, they'll boo you.
Yeah.
So Bush is like, oh, great.
And not to like, I don't think this ruins the video or ruins the story. The guy throws an absolute strike down the middle of the plate.
And he was nervous. Jeter had made him nervous.
Well, they also talk about how hard it would have been to do with the bulletproof. I mean, the guy had 15, 20 pounds on him when he's going to throw this ball.
Right.
Throws right down the middle. The place erupts. And like I said, for all of George W. Bush's flaws, there are a lot of times that you can look back during that presidency, and there are little moments like that where he, in a weird way, was a lot of what people needed at that time, bizarrely.
Yes.
And he had a ton of flaws. And then the other video that is fascinating, and it's actually narrated by Tom Hanks. There is, I think I told you about this. There is this one's only like 10 or 12 minutes. It's much shorter. There's a little documentary done about the boats that were coming across. You told me about this. That were coming across the harbor and getting people off of, I'm going to biff my geography of New York City here. Where were they trying to remove them from?
From Manhattan.
From Manhattan. It is, in history, it is the largest naval evacuation, boat evacuation in history. More people were evacuated by boat off of, from what I understand, they actually evacuated more people off of Manhattan than Dunkirk. And hopefully I'm not getting that wrong, but that's how they describe it in the video.
You don't realize how many boats there, but when you, like the Sully, and I can't think of anything else other than Sully, the movie where he put the, like, that's how, like, and I know there's water taxis and they take the Staten Island ferry, but there's so much more water activity and boat activity there than you could imagine. And that's how they got those people to safety when he put the plane down in the Hudson, was all the people that just reacted, that whether they were private, whether they were public.
It's estimated that over 500,000 people were rescued by boat during 9/11. So removing all the people from the island onto the thing. It is so, obviously this time of the year, you always see the news documentaries and they always have the towers and the planes and everything else. But if you're looking for like other things to watch that are emotional and just kind of give off good vibes about that day and trying to put like a positive perspective on it, the George W. Bush first pitch and then the Tom Hanks naval boat rescue, 2 videos worth finding. And I believe they're both on YouTube.
This is a stupid story that has nothing to do with what we're talking about other than the geography of it. Right at the beginning of the Revolutionary War, people don't understand how much water is around. New York City is a port city. That's why. And there's so many with the Hudson River. And when you look at, Staten Island's an island, and there's so much. So right at the beginning of the Revolutionary War, the British had the colonial troops pinned.
Okay.
And there was this, and like they were going to be slaughtered, and the war was going to be over 2 weeks into it. I think it was immediate.
Yeah.
But there was heavy fog, and the British couldn't see.
Yeah.
So they were like, we're going to wait till the fog burns off. Where can these people go? And fishing boats, like they spent the entire night getting the troops out. This is when General Washington, before he was President Washington, when he was just General George Washington. Yeah. And then like the fog lifted, and the British were like, where did they go?
Yeah.
And I saw that on the History Channel one time, and it was the same thing, but different. But yeah, people don't understand the amount of boat and nautical, and just when you look at a map, there's just water everywhere around the city.
Oh, absolutely. So check out those 2 videos. Really, really interesting. There's a memorial ride right here in Lycoming County. I forget the exact statistics on it. We have a really awesome video on NorthcentralPa.com of the 9/11 memorial
Phoebe and
ride.
Carrie did it, didn't they?
Yes, and it is really, really good. But there's some stats behind it. It's the largest memorial for 9/11, or the second largest memorial.
It's the biggest one east of the Mississippi. It's
something like
huge.
that.
And it's not like it's huge for our county. It's huge for our region. It's huge for Pennsylvania. It's huge on a national level.
Yes. So if you get a chance, check that out.
Have you gone and sat and watched it?
No. I mean, I have accidentally seen it. I would like to give myself the credit that I went out and supported it. I have not. But because of living here, I have gone out on that day and I've seen them ride by. And
I think it starts in Montgomery, comes over 15 across the Market Street Bridge. I've seen it because it comes right down through Broad Street in Montoursville. Yeah. So Montoursville people go set up on Broad Street and watch. And it is half hour long.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they just keep coming.
Yeah.
It is.
Really
I've heard, and I don't know this because I've never ridden, that the people who start it return, I don't even know how long the miles is, but it goes all the way through and all the way around, that they get back before the end riders have taken off because there's just that many riders.
So many people.
It's
really,
awesome.
really. Check out the video on NorthcentralPa.com because it actually shows how they all pile on and kind of join the line. It's pretty fascinating to see. The numbers can be overwhelming. Texas governor, Penn State.
Whichever. What do you want to go with?
Let's do this. You were more interested in this. Texas Governor Abbott has signed a bill that aims to stop social media companies from banning users or nixing posts based solely on political opinions. We also know recently about the abortion bill, and he also recently, I'm blanking on what the other one was. I'll come up with it. But we had talked about.
Those are the only 2 I knew.
But you had talked about kind of grandstanding elections and kind of people representing bills and like, do they really believe in them or are they grandstanding? Like, are they just trying to prove something? But Governor Abbott is unique because he has been pumping these out now for the last couple of weeks. And I don't know how many of them are actually going to like uphold.
Well, the coincidence of it, the abortion law was a couple weeks ago. And the deputizing, if you will, of the common citizen to turn people into that. I think it was yesterday that the Attorney General of the U.S. said they're suing Texas because it's just unconstitutional. And the guy's like, basically, this won't hold up. And I think the same day that the Attorney General announced that they're suing Texas because the abortion law is unconstitutional, that the governor of Texas announced, by the way, we're going after Facebook and Twitter and all these, and that the behemoths of social media have also said, like, well, he can't win. He's not going to win. Right. So then the people who are not emotionally raptured into it and have really no fiscal dog in the fight are looking back at it and saying, he knows he can't win. He's blowing taxpayer money just to try to grandstand to say, like, look I'm fighting the good fight. I'm taking on the challenges that my base wants me to take on to propel him as a presidential candidate. Okay. So then the question becomes, as the governor of Texas, is he really intelligently governing, or is he just trying to grandstand? So, and we've talked that that's the society that we live in now. The elections have become reality TV, and it's a high school president. You're running for high school class office, and it's about popularity, and it's not about the ability to govern. It's about how many clicks you can get, how entertaining you are that you can move the needle.
I'm curious of your opinion on this because we've never talked about this, and just listening to you talk, it made me think of it. You brought up the point when we were talking about 9/11, like the country just feels so divided. And even though you and I agree, like if you get people in a room together, they're a lot closer than what they realize. But online and in the public's perception, the country is divided. I do wonder, like, if I'm a governor or a senator or anybody who's trying to introduce legislation or introduce bills or vote on things, I do wonder if there's this idea of like, no matter what I represent or no matter what I present to the table, half of the people are going to be against it. And so even though I disagree with the abortion bill that Texas has pushed through, and even though I'm not fully on board with this social media censorship bill, there is this idea that like, if you are the governor of Texas, name something you could present where half the people aren't going to say, well, he's just doing this because of X, or he just wants to run for president, or he just wants. Yeah.
Right now, the governor of Texas could say that was offensive pass interference, and most of the people in his state are going to agree with him.
Yes,
well,
that's
even worse, and I think to your point, if you try to be a centrist, that there's this argument there is no middle now. At least there's no vocal middle. Mm-hmm. That if you come out and you try to be rational and represent both sides, now you have everyone mad at you.
Yeah, you've pushed everybody off to the side.
So that might even make it worse. That you're right. That I'm gonna piss off half the people. If I try to be a rational, decent individual, I'm gonna piss off all the people. At least all the ones that are speaking.
Yeah, I guess my fear would be, and this is the point that I've always made. If you want to disagree with the governor of Texas, by all means do it. I just did it 30 seconds ago. Like, there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with them. And we've just gotten to this point where, like, I don't like. Do you think there are people who don't propose bills? We talked about this with COVID-19 yesterday and doctors, and how like some of these doctors are very quiet because like they don't. Why would you want to present your work when half the country is just going to rip it apart, right? Like why? So I do wonder, like, are there bills that aren't being proposed? Are there things that aren't being tried to push through? Are we missing out on progressive actions because certain people want to be elected or want to stay in office, and they're terrified because it's not enough to just disagree with somebody anymore.
Right.
Like, it's not enough. Like, you can't. It's so weird because like I can disagree with Ted Cruz and I can disagree with Greg Abbott, but like I also think they're just people. Like they wake up in the morning and they eat breakfast and they have kids and like they go to work, and like there's a disconnect now of like you can dislike somebody, you can disagree with what they're saying, but like you don't have to hate them and you don't have to think they're like the worst human beings on the planet. Even if I vehemently disagree with the policies or the things that they're trying to do, I feel like we've completely missed that gap. And I think Texas is a very good example of that.
Well, I think above me, I think people like the anger. There's a faction of people who like the hate, and they're looking for the hate. Mm-hmm. And it is, I mean, and I keep comparing politics to sports, but we see there are lots of people who will watch the Penn State game because they love the Penn State game, or they love Penn State, but there's lots of people who watch Penn State because they hate Penn State.
I hate watch LeBron James every night.
and you're a horrible person.
So I get it. No, but my perspective is like he's a great dad and he's probably a decent person. And then
why do you hate watch? Are you afraid because you love Jordan and you're afraid that
because as a fanatic, right? That's what a fan is. You're fanatic. You're fanatical. Like in my fanatical world, it's just hard to imagine there's somebody better than Michael Jordan.
And that's what you want. But you will say that LeBron James is one of the best 5 players ever.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So my point being is like some of the stuff that's going on in Texas, and we've blasted Texas. We blasted Cruz when he tried to go to Mexico and say that he was dropping his kids off. You and I talked about the electrical grid and how that all played out. Like, and now what's happening with them, we touched on the abortion topic. We have not shied away from being like, what the hell is Texas doing? But I never want to live in a world where Texas isn't Texas. Like, I kind of like the idea that there is this state that isn't just falling in line and just saying, well, we don't want cancel culture and we're just falling in line and all those things. There are 100% things that are going to get pushed back on Texas. Like you brought up the abortion bill and how they're being sued right now by the Attorney General of the U.S. And that will probably get repealed and it probably should be repealed. But at the same time, like I don't want to live in a world where it's just like there's one voice and whatever the federal government deems, you don't have states going like, well, that doesn't work for us, or we want to try this, or we want to do that. I mean, think of the things that would still be wrong if there weren't specific states trying to push the bill.
Right.
And so now you want states pushing the right ones, but you need states that are against the grain. And I will give Texas, without a doubt, is against the grain.
I don't like the fact when a governor is thinking, I'm going to push this, even though I know I can't win, because it helps me in my personal career, whether now I become, even if I'm not a presidential candidate, am I a vice presidential candidate, am I in the cabinet? That's what's crappy. You've been elected to govern, you need to govern well, and there are people, it's like you watch, the cop shows, and there's like, or whether it's legal or whether it's whatever, they're like, we can't get an indictment on it. Sure. And if he looks at this and says, we can't win this, it's unconstitutional or whatever, if we do it, we're just wasting taxpayer money, then he shouldn't do it.
No, you're exactly right. I reminded of you brought up the book Moneyball, and as you were saying that, in the movie, there's a scene where Philip Seymour Hoffman is the coach, and he says to the GM, he goes, it's hard to coach on a 1-year contract, because you're always coaching for your job. There is something about the political system where you are always, no matter what position you're in, there is always an election upcoming, and it may not be tomorrow, it may not be, but it is coming. And so back in the day, it was probably much easier to govern knowing that an election process was 6 months, or an election you knew. I mean, now the election process starts the moment you've won.
It's constant.
The re-election process starts right away. So how do you, I guess what I'm saying is, you obviously want people to be decent people. That's what they're being paid to do. But at the same time, if your job is to be a senator, the only way you can do your job is to continue being the senator. And that includes winning re-election.
Judge rules Apple is not, quote, illegal monopolist, end quote, in high-profile Epic case. That just came through. I don't know any more than that, but a win for Apple.
We should talk about Apple someday. We should dive in it. We should do a day where we talk about Theranos and Apple, because the whole Elizabeth Holmes Theranos thing's happening right now.
Is that the blood?
We've talked about it 5 times.
You keep bringing her up, and you're like, you know who this is. Let me explain to you something about getting old. When you get old, you suck with names. If you tell me, it's the blood story then yes, you keep telling me her name, and I'm like, I don't know who that is.
It's Elizabeth Holmes. I don't know what else to tell
Tomorrow, you're going to ask me her name again. I'm going to say, I don't know who that is. You're going to say, it's the blood story. And then I'm going to say, I know that one.
But this is the psychotic part, is you're trying to act like that's my fault.
No, it's just a reality of age.
And you're going to say it again tomorrow, and I'm going to...
I wonder when... I've always sucked with names. And
I'm awful with names.
I meet someone, and at the end, we'd be like, there's... And it's like so-and-so's boyfriend or so-and-so's roommate or something. Yeah. And I'll be able to tell you where they went to high school, where they went to college, what their major was, where they work, where they use. Right. I can tell you, they're like, what's her name? And this is where I get to. It's either a common name like Steve or Joe, or it's something a little eccentric but I can't tell you what it is. Okay. And that is, I could answer every question about their lives that was of interest to me. Their name doesn't interest me. Where you went to college? Well, that's interesting. What was your major? What do you do? Where did you? Do you have kids? Are you married? Are you divorced? Are you whatever? All these things I can tell you. I cannot tell you their name because I suck with names.
Pretty fascinating. Well, you're just not interested. Names just don't interest you.
I'm much more concerned of where are you from? Yeah, that interests me. Your name, your parents picked it. It was probably, it was boring anyway. I don't know. And I've been told you're supposed to repeat it to yourself. No. What I've actually gotten good at is I tell people upon meeting them that I'm going to ask you your name 3 or 4 times before it sinks. So don't be offended, but I won't remember your name.
That's a hell of a way to go through life.
It is. You know what's helped me with names? Facebook. Because it keeps popping up.
Because it keeps showing it in front of it.
That's where I've learned people's married names. From the girls I went to high school with, The only way I learned their married name is
Well, that's my biggest issue with Facebook right now is someone will come up on my feed and I won't recognize the last name.
because they didn't put the maiden name.
Because they got married. And so all of a sudden I'll have like Jenny Smith and I'll be like,
I don't know Jenny Smith.
I don't know who is Jenny Smith. So then I have to click on the profile and I'm like, oh, that's Jenny Williams, but she got married to a Smith. So that's my issue right now with Facebook.
Yeah.
First world problems.
Isn't it though? It's tough. It's amazing we survived the day.
Do we want to talk about this?
Which one?
Penn State football.
Yes, we should mention this. First of all, there is no good primetime game on tomorrow night.
Yes.
Nothing. If you want to go to the movies on a Saturday night, or you want to have a date night and you can go to a restaurant with no television, tomorrow is your night. There's a good game at noon, Ohio State, Oregon. There's a good game at 3:30 or 4, Iowa State. And then there's actually a couple good games on the West Coast at like 10:30. Okay. But there is the primetime football dearth tomorrow. It's good versus crap is what it is.
Pretty brutal. Anything about Penn State?
They're huge favorites. Who do they even play? Toledo? Ball State.
Ball State.
Notre Dame plays Toledo.
Okay.
It's crap. But it's the first home game with 100,000 people are going to be there.
My streams are flooded right now with people like RV pictures.
Oh, they're jacked.
Setting up shop.
And once upon a time, we would have called this a super spreader event.
Sure.
It is that we joked about this. It is insane. Some of the mandates that people that are being put into place, and then 100,000 people. And how many? I've never heard. What are the estimates? How many people are actually there? Because there's 100,000 that go in.
Yeah, like 125,000 go in. I think it's like 125.
It's not that many now.
I think
110.
it is. Yeah, because they put the upper.
They've added. I don't think it's that many. But
I'll look it up real quick. But go ahead.
But how many people are outside that don't go in? 50?
Oh my God.
Are there 50,000? You think more than 50?
I mean, the campus alone is up to 35.
Something like that.
30,000, 35,000. And not every kid goes to the games. I mean, it's not. So
but not every kid goes to tailgate either.
No, I get that. But see, this is the funny part.
Oh, you mean just in
general. Like,
okay, that's
because
fair.
I've told you the worst part about going to a Penn State football game is going into the game. The majority of times when we go, we tailgate. And when the game starts and people start to flood in,
downtown?
We go downtown.
See, I've always wanted to do that, and I've never done it.
That, to me, that's the best way. Now, if you have awesome tickets, I get it. Like if you've got great seats and you've got your section and it's all, I totally get going into the game. If you are somebody that just has like your flimsy ticket and it's like up in the it's up in the nosebleed wherever, I'm telling you, like, you will have a better time downtown. It's not even close.
I've always wanted to do that.
It's not, and especially if it's raining or it's cold. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Go tailgate, have fun. When people start flooding into the gates, head downtown, enjoy yourself. And the best part is when they have a big W, you're already there.
But you can't, there's no, I figured you can't get in. There's no seats. They're all capacity.
In the bars?
Yeah.
During the game, you can.
You can?
Oh, yeah. During the game, you can. Now, don't get me wrong, it's busy.
But it's not, you're not waiting outside.
No, you can get in. You can get into the right bars, like if you go when people start flooding into the gates. The challenge is once the game's over.
After the game's over, you're already there.
The game's over. But now you're already, go to the spot you want to be at. You're in, you're settled, like you're good to go.
And then you're ready to work it.
We were at the Ohio State game where they blocked the field goal and they ran it all the way back. You know which one I'm talking about?
You were there.
We were in Penn State, so we tailgated. We came down. I have an insane story about losing my car keys, which is for another day. But we were tailgated, came downtown. We were at the saloon, which is one where you go down below. And we watched it. Guy blocked. It went nuts. And it was like the best night because we were in the saloon. And so like they come flooding down from the field. People are coming in the bar, everything else. Fantastic night. We never stepped foot inside the stadium.
Let me just say, if you start out with, I have an insane story about Penn State, and it ends with like car keys is the punchline.
It's a pretty crazy story.
That's not the insanity I was looking for.
It's a pretty crazy
I was looking
story.
for something a little more exciting than car keys.
Oh, no, it's a pretty crazy story. But where were we going with that? 25,000, the seating, everything else.
Super spreader.
So when not a super spreader, but when you
what do you mean not a super spreader?
So when you bring people into the tailgate, when you consider the fans, the students, everything else, you've got to be pushing $250,000.
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Like on a big, like they got Auburn. They have a whiteout Auburn game, not this weekend, next weekend. You don't think there's 250,000 people in Happy Valley? Really?
No.
125 are going into the stadium. You don't think there's another 125 around Happy Valley?
See, I don't know because I have never gone and tailgated and not gone in, and I've never gone downtown.
Okay.
I don't think another 100,000 people are around town.
I mean, I could be wrong. That's what I would guess.
But there's a lot of people.
I would have guessed on like your big nights, like your whiteout 7:30 p.m. Ohio State, Auburn, whoever you're playing. I would guess there's 250,000.
So this would be my next question too. I mean, the bars have to close, right? Isn't that still the law? They don't make exemptions. No, after the game. So whiteout's going to be prime time. If they beat Auburn,
yes.
So it's what I'm going to say. It's a 7:30 kick.
10:30.
So it's 10:30, 11. What time does the party end?
4:30, 5. Now, like some of the bars,
but the bars have to close.
The bars,
are there exceptions?
The bars, they're shuffling people out between 2 and 3, and they're kind of starting to get it out. But I mean, like the streets aren't empty until 5 o'clock.
Okay.
I mean, it's just it's crazy. It's insane.
And again, that would be cool to be a part of.
Sure.
In my younger years.
Yeah.
Now I'm like Cedric the Entertainer in that movie where he's like, God, I'm just tired just thinking about it.
Sure.
But I've always wanted to be on a campus like I've always wanted to be in Lewisburg when Bucknell wins to go to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
I've wanted to be in a hometown bar, not for Duke or North Carolina who makes it every year, but for one of those that you have to win to get in.
Right.
I've always thought that would be fun.
It would be really neat. We were at Penn State when these are some names. They played Indiana, but it was when Indiana was good. Like
Calvert Chaney?
No, I'm too young for that.
Oh, okay.
It was.
I was in school when Calvert Chaney was. Okay.
Yes, they had like Eric Gordon, who.
He's still in the league.
Yeah, and Tom Crean had just taken over the job.
Okay.
So we got seats. We were like in the second or third row because then like Penn State, Taylor Battle played for him, but you could get tickets.
I remember
for Penn State.
Taylor Battle was good.
Yes, you could get tickets for Penn State pretty easily. So 4 of us went. We're watching the game. We're like 3 rows back, like right around center court.
The only guy, by the way, named Taylor with no Y in his name.
So anyway, we're watching the game, and all of a sudden, like out of the corner of my eye, a guy comes down and he's walking towards the thing, and he walks like 2 rows in front of us. It's Pat Riley.
Shut up.
Swear to God.
Pat Riley was at the Penn State, Indiana
because
game.
At that time, Eric Gordon was going to be a top 5 pick, and the Miami Heat were going to be like one of the top 4 picks because they were one of the worst 3 teams in the league. And the way the lottery system works out, you know how far back
you can only fall so far.
So Pat Riley like walks out. Well, Penn State knocks off Indiana. Like and Indiana was top 5
Indiana was
in the country line, and they flooded the court, everything else. And it is like it's everything you now. Listen, it's brief, like it goes by quick. Like it's like
it's not
you flood the court, and then once you're on the court, there's not much to do. Like you're just kind of there, and like it's whatever. But for those like 30 seconds, it is really, really unique. It's neat to flood the field or flood the court like in one of those Power 5 conferences. Really, really cool. Very, very fortunate I got to be there.
Well, I'll tell you right now, Penn State's beating Auburn.
You think so?
Whiteout at night. Auburn's
the whiteout's crazy. 100.
And I have no idea how good Auburn is this year, but Penn State's good enough that they're going to beat Auburn.
106,572. This one estimate here online, and I don't know how true this is, they're saying that it's around 115,000 after you include like workers, security,
stadium personnel,
and everything else.
Okay.
So yeah, interesting. Anything else about Penn State football? You think they're going to beat Auburn? That's neat. I don't know how good Auburn is. I know nothing about Auburn.
I don't either. Who can't? I think they could beat like the Eagles on a whiteout.
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you one player for Auburn. Usually, I can tell you.
Bo Jackson.
Usually, I can tell you a quarterback or like a defensive guy or something. Like I can't name one athlete for the Auburn football team this year.
You see, you kept going. I was going to give you Charles Barkley next.
Yeah,
I was going to keep naming Auburn players. Yeah, I can't either. And I'm sure they're good. They're from the SEC. I'm sure they're good. Okay. But they have to travel north at night. Penn State hopes it's 50 degrees.
This is
because if it's 50 degrees, these guys from Auburn will be freezing. and it's whiteout. It's going to be insane. If COVID can stay away for one more week, that's going to be a blast, and Penn State will beat Auburn. There's no doubt in my mind.
That's why all these mandates are in place, right?
To keep the Auburn-Penn State
so
game?
To keep the Auburn-Penn State going? Is that not what all the mandates are for?
After that, just everything else is gravy.
I thought that's what they were for.
And I love that phrase because I don't really like gravy. That's
for anybody, because you can't say the mandates are like, I don't know how to say this politically correctly. Like, to say the mandates are in place for health and safety when we're about to have Penn State and listen, I might be there tomorrow. I'm not sitting here saying like don't do it or shouldn't do it, or like, I'm just saying like the hypocrisy to the mandates and the fact that we're about to have a Penn State home football game. Not like, I just can't wrap. I don't get it. No, it doesn't make sense at all.
There's no sense to be made. I wonder how hard of a ticket this is. Because usually Ball State would be the one that people are like, I don't care about the Ball State.
Okay.
And I don't want to say the fair weather fans will go to this one because it's early September. It's still warm. You're not battling the elements and stuff.
Yeah.
But because it's been so long and because people are itching, I would bet that this is a tough ticket.
See, I think, okay, I could be wrong. I agree with you that this value the ticket, period. I think there's an overwhelming amount of people who go to Happy Valley on a Saturday and never even think about having a ticket. Like, it's not even on there.
I'm with you.
They've got their food, their RV, their TV, and we are here. Like, the ticket is like an abstract thing that they don't even.
Well, and I've had a person who used to work for me who, and she told me the family has tickets. The family's had 4 tickets. And I think they had like 4.
Mm-hmm.
But they take the RV full, and they figure out during the game who's going to go in.
Yeah.
And I remember she said, I don't know if my mom's ever gone in because she knows there's people who care about the game more than she does. She'd gladly sit outside, listen on the radio, and everyone cheers and she cheers. And
here's the other, for especially NFL tickets. I think this happens more often with NFL tickets than NCAA tickets, but what the sneakiest, best thing, like, this is a strategy that I should start doing. People will buy the season passes. They will not go into a game the whole year. But what they really want is the
playoff tickets.
They want the parking pass.
Ah.
They want the RV spot. They want the parking pass. They want to be able to set up shop as close to the stadium as possible. And that is the value. And then they sell their tickets.
I knew a guy in Baltimore.
But every weekend they show up in their RV ready to party.
Back in Baltimore in the 90s when the Orioles were consistently good and Camden Yards was brand new and it sold out every night, I had a guy I knew who bought the season ticket package. He bought 13. It was a 13-game package.
Mm-hmm.
He sold off every ticket that he had. He's like, if I go to a game during the year, it will be if someone gives me a ticket. Every ticket that I pay for, I'm selling.
Sure.
And I think that I can make enough profit that then when I get a playoff ticket, and as a season ticket holder, they're like, you can have game 2 to this series. He goes, I will get one and it'll be free. And he went through all that effort to have a free playoff ticket. And it's hard to make the baseball playoffs. It's not like baseball's the toughest one, football, depending on your argument. But yeah, he did it. He bought season tickets just so he would have playoff tickets.
Yeah. No, it's not a bad strategy. What are you going to do this weekend before we go, real quickly?
I got some work. I got to work. I'm not, I don't know. There's no college. I'll watch some college. I'll probably watch Iowa State.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm a little, the Cowboys don't play now. I'm sure the NFL regular season, my son's going to want to watch a lot of football on Sunday.
Sure.
So we may end up in a local watering hole watching football and shoving good football. There's something about that food that's just better with a football game on.
Sure. I forget that in real estate, your weekends aren't always your weekends.
No, I got some stuff.
I always forget that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching.
That's one of the things about adulthood that we talked about, that it's not all that it's cracked up to be.
The weekends?
No, and you're like, you think as a kid on a week, I can do whatever I want. If I want to go sit and watch football all day, I can because I'm an adult and I make the rules. And then sometimes, well, you got to work. So yeah, you can, but you can't because you got to work.
When you put it that way, you're very right. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all your local news. I am Jeff Everett, and he is Mark Messina, and we will be back next week.
Pass interference on the offense.